Dr. Carson, thank you for joining us on Sky News. First of all, is your campaign in crisis?
No, not at all.
You have said that if there are backroom deals amongst senior Republicans that you'd be out of here. Are you paving the way for an exit?
Well, no, I'm just telling the truth. I don't want to be a part of anything that thwarts the will of the people. So, as long as things are open and consistent with integrity, I have no problem with it. But once you start manipulating and thwarting the will of the people, that's not something I want to be a part of.
I think Donald Trump might think that he's everybody's main rival. What do people see in him?
I think they see a lot of bravado, a lot of confidence. And in a situation where we've just gone through several years where, there seems to be uncertainty, that can be something that's very appealing to people.
In the past, you've said that you don't believe climate change should be politicized. Does that mean that as president, you wouldn't have attended the summit in Paris?
Whether I would have or not, it certainly would not have been the thing that I would have thought was the premier issue in the world and the cause of terrorism and everything of that nature.
But
I just don't
would
think
you have
so.
gone?
I may well have gone.
Do you think as president that you would be engaged and informed enough on climate change to treat it with the significance that I think the world now recognizes?
I would treat it with the significance that I think it deserves, but I would not make it the overarching driver of all of my policies.
What is climate change?
Well, if you look at the world, in the history of the world, at all points in time, temperatures are going up or temperatures are going down. If you don't remember because you're too young, but in the 70s, on the front of Newsweek magazine, there was a big glacier because we're entering the new ice age. And then later on it was, we're going to all burn up, everything's going to melt. And then it was, well, we don't know which one it is, so let's just call it change. Now, when things stop changing, then we're dead.
Your views have been called eccentric. I'm referring to specifics such as your view that the pyramids were built to store grain, that if the Jews had had guns, the Holocaust could have been prevented, that Obamacare is worse than slavery. You're obviously entitled to those views. But the fact is, a lot of people do find them alienating. Some find them laughable. Do you think you'd have to rein yourself in as president?
Well, first of all, recognize, for instance, with the grain deal, somebody goes back 20 years to a private talk where I said, that's a feasible possibility. And of course, anybody who's objective can go back and find that I'm not the first one to think that. And there are hieroglyphics showing people carrying grain out of the... So, I don't think that that's such a wild thing. But that's not something that I've been sitting around talking about and advocating. That's something that somebody's going back, digging up and trying to say, oh, this is a really strange theory. That's the case with a lot of this stuff. And I think I understand that the news media, they're supposed to vet people. And, if there's scandals and things, of course you want to know about them. In my case, they can't find any scandals. Therefore, well, let's see if we can somehow make this guy look crazy. And I just think it's so dishonest.
Do you recognize that some of your views aren't what you would call mainstream? Could that be alienating in the role of president?
Well, give me an example.
I've given you 3 examples.
Which one do you want to talk about?
Well,
I just talked about one of them.
Those particular views. That
in terms of
if the Jews had weapons, for example, that the Holocaust wouldn't have happened. A lot of people found that pretty outrageous claim.
I never said that. Did I say that? I said if they had had weapons, it would have been more difficult. And that's the reason that they disarmed them first. And that is typical of tyrants. They don't want to have a difficult time, so they disarm people. That was the point. That's not an outrageous thing at all.
Could the world take America seriously with you as president?
I believe they could, absolutely. I think the world's not used to having somebody who speaks straightforward and honestly.
Now, you have been criticised for a lack of knowledge on foreign policy, but in your book, A More Perfect Union, you say you were fortunate enough to visit 50 countries. So with that experience in mind...
58 now.
58, right, okay. So with that in mind, who do you think is America's key ally in the modern world?
Well, that's one of the problems that's going on right now. our allies can't trust us because we tend not to be trustworthy. You know, we've turned our backs on Israel. You know, there was a gentleman's agreement in Ukraine that if they got rid of their nuclear arsenal and something happened, we would be there for them. Were we? Of course not. I just think that what we really need to do is shore up our relationships, particularly with all of our NATO allies, but also in the Middle East. You know, we have traditionally, you know, had good relationships with, you know, Egypt, Jordan, you know, Kuwait, Morocco, you know, with a whole host of places. And why are they not enthusiastically joining us in a coalition? Because we are untrustworthy to the degree that they're sitting there wondering if we line up with the U.S. and then they decide they're not going to support us, we're facing the full wrath of ISIS by ourselves. So they're kind of sitting on the fence. And we need to abolish the thought that we are not trustworthy.
Donald Trump has said that London has a Muslim problem. Is he right? And do you think that Europe has a Muslim problem? And how would you fix that?
Well, I guess it depends on what Europe wants. I guess it depends on what London wants. Are they happy with a society where, you know, there are multiple Sharia courts and enclaves of people who perhaps have a different way of living and a different standard of living than they do?
So do you agree with Donald Trump that there are no-go zones in London?
What I just said is it depends on what they want. If they don't want that, then it's a problem.
But do they exist now? You think they exist now?
If they want that, then it's not a problem. Yes, they exist, of course.
Places where you can't go?
I don't know whether you can go there or not, but there are certainly places that have a different way of life. And there are enclaves like that.
What do you think should be done about that?
Well, it depends on what the people in that country want.
They want safety?
It's sort of like, you may remember a few years ago in Australia, when the Prime Minister said, look, people want to come here from other places, and I understand that. It's a nice place. We love it, and we love our culture. And if you want to come here and assimilate to our culture, you're welcome. And if you don't, there are other places you can go. And that was the philosophy, and that turned out to be a very popular philosophy. You know, if London wants that, if England wants that, they ought to make that declaration. And if they don't want that, and if they're quite willing to change, that's fine too.
US citizens being radicalized online, it's a problem. We've seen that recently. How do you stop that happening?
Well, first of all, I think you need to monitor the internet to a much greater extent. I think you need to put out counter messages, and I think you need to be involved in cyber attacks.
Does the Muslim community need to play a bigger role?
They need to play a much bigger role. The imams, the clerics, and the community itself. It's going to be, obviously, much more endearing to the rest of the population if the Muslim population is the one pointing out who the radicals are.
Do you think you were endearing to the Muslim population when you said that their faith was inconsistent with the Constitution?
Well, I said that if they embraced the entirety of Islam, including Sharia law is not compatible with the American Constitution. I don't think anybody can disagree with that.
What about the issue of guns? The number of Americans killed by guns hugely outnumbers those killed by terrorism. Isn't that the key job for any president, to sort that out?
It already is sorted out in the sense that we have a Constitution with a Second Amendment that guarantees people the right to keep and bear arms. So does that mean that we shouldn't be looking at ways to keep dangerous weapons out of the hands of people who are mentally unstable? Sure, we could still look at that, but not in any way compromising the Second Amendment.
So you think the gun problem is already sorted out, courtesy of the Second Amendment?
The problem is not guns, the problem is people.
We know that President Obama enjoys several rounds of golf. What would President Carson do to kick back and relax?
Probably play pool. I enjoy playing pool. It's very relaxing. And my wife is an excellent pool player. She became an excellent pool player after we got married because she realized I enjoyed it a lot.
Who wins?
I generally win, although if in any way I slack off, she'll win.